welcome back everyone to Master Game Design, Unreal Engine 5 Stylized Environment and third-person blueprint course. In the last lesson we left ourselves off by creating a nicer detail out of our islands and just setting ourselves up with a bit of a nicer depth towards the ocean itself. Now we're going to continue on with this and actually make sure that we add a nice overlay on what the map will look like. As a starting point, we usually create ourselves a Greybox, and that's a process where you gotta refine it constantly and make sure that it works well in both the artistic style and the game design kind of way for the player to work it out properly. So usually when I started out, I prefer to, instead of just doing it from scratch and just applying it, I prefer to have a nice Greybox out. And for the sake of this course, I'll just show you how to do it, and then we'll also have ourselves a nice Greybox to add afterwards to just use it as a reference for building sake. And before doing that though, we also have within the resource pack references folder, we also will have a couple of images just as a reference point of view, and I will just talk through them in regards to how it was set up in regards to the overall shots. So as a starting point, when creating the level itself, we usually go for the aesthetics first, making sure that the view is set up properly. So as you can see over here, this is the type of a build we're going to create. But afterwards, we also need to intertwine the game design as well into it. So that's usually done just iterating between one and another. We try not to do both at once, as otherwise it can complicate certain issues in regards to just overwhelming yourself. You don't need to do that realistically. And yeah, as a starting point, again, you don't need to do this right now because I'll just show you how I would usually start it off. And we're going to use an already existing Greybox. But if we were to start it from scratch, I would usually go to selection mode, go to use modeling mode, modeling toolkit. If you're not seeing this type of a tab over here on the top, what you'll need to do is basically you need to go to edit, plugins, and search for modeling. And there you go, modeling tools editor mode. You need to make sure that this is ticked on, and if you do tick it on when it was ticked off, you'll just need to restart it on the bottom right hand corner of the window, and afterwards you'll get yourself this type of a setup. Now, an actual way to start it off would be just to usually grab the modeling toolkit, go on to the either primitive shapes over here or path extrude. Primitive shapes will allow you to just create quick shapes. So if you were to select box, make sure that the new asset location is set up to auto generate world relative folder. So that's going to give us the best type of a setup. And as you can see, like so, we can click and then it's going to give us a box. Then we can go ahead and click accept, and we can just make it larger, make it smaller. We can play around with these shapes and get ourselves some nicer design. We can also grab ourselves some stairs, for example. If we want to have some elevation and whatnot, we can click accept, and afterwards we can click play and get our character to just try out the level itself and see how this would work. So that's the general premise of this. And then finally we would have something like path extrusion. This is quite a nice way of using, as in if we were to click on it, we have points to work with. We can click on one point, another, and another, and once we connect it all, we can then extrude it and bring it outwards to create a nice type of a wall, just like that. The alternative way of doing it is going to be, if we want to just make a nice hollow path, would be to just go back to modeling and use the draw extrude. This is basically the same tool, except in this case it's not going to give us the thickness of the walls. It's actually just going to, if we were to create nice type of design, we can just create a quick shape like so, hit complete, and there you go. We're going to get ourselves a nice overall type of a setup. So just like that, we're able to create shapes, and just like that, we're able to just play around with the overall shapes, I'm going to click on this button over here, which will allow us to basically go on to 4 different viewports, showing the back side, the right side, perspective, and top points. And just like that, we're going to make use out of it in order to create ourselves some nicer shapes. By default, it might look all over the place in regards to where we're looking. So what I tend to do is, if I have a nice shape selected, I'm just going to select this island over here, and then I'm going to click F in order to focus the entire view. I'm going to click F over here, and then you'll see that it brings every viewport to the focus of this island. And just like that, we can just zoom back in and just start playing around with it. I'm going to check where the front is actually real quick. So I'm just going to maybe place a cube over here, hit accept, and see that this is going to be the front of the islands, which is great. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and delete it and show you how I'd usually use the poly extrude tool. So by clicking on poly extrude tool, we can now go on to the top down view, and we can just play around with the shapes. We can also just click on a couple of points just like so, and create a really nice and simple type of a setup. Once we create the shape like so, you can see that I'm dragging it around like so. You can then go to another viewport and just drag out the shape just like that. And then afterwards you hit complete, you go again and create a new shape just like that. And it's a bit hard by default, since we're not able to see what kind of a reference for size that we have. So what I usually like to do when starting out this type of a design is I'd like to get myself a human reference. Luckily for us, it's actually quite simple to do, since we already started off with a third person blueprint type of a setup within Unreal Engine. And you'll see that we have something called third person folder. If we were to go into it, we actually should have blueprints, or sorry, not that. If we were to go on to characters folder, so this one over here, within the content section, we're going to get ourselves the mannequins. So let's go ahead and grab one of the meshes. It doesn't really matter which one we use, to be honest. I'm just going to grab the first one out and see how it looks like in regards to the size itself. So I'm just going to grab it, drag and drop it, and you can see just like so, we're going to have ourselves a tiny human scale in comparison to this building. So this, in comparison, the size for the buildings look quite tiny. The human reference is actually quite small in regards to what I just did. And yeah, that's why in regards to the setting up the buildings just like that, it's really useful to have a sort of a scale reference to what we're working with. And I'm just going to place it next to the side. And again, when going to do a type of greyboxing and setting yourselves up, afterwards, all we got to do is just, I'm going to click F real quick to just zoom into the main human body, like so. And then I'm just going to start working with the overall design. So again, going back to the poly extrude, going to just play around with the shapes. So for example, I want maybe a couple of buildings up on the side, just like that. I'd connect this, drag it outwards, see what kind of height I want. So maybe something like that. And that looks all right. So afterwards I hit complete, and we continue on with this type of a setup until we get the type of a look that we want. Again, this is creating simple static meshes, very basic type of stuff. So even when we're done with just building it out like so, we can go ahead and even just duplicate it like so and grab ourselves more of an interesting buildings, or even like we can extrude it. Click R, by the way, to go into scale mode and just extrude it like so. I'm going to go back onto the setup and see how this looks like. And yeah, this by default might not look quite as interesting, but it's a crucial point in regards to setting ourselves up with a nice look, or when we want to design the overall aesthetics and see how this would look like. Yeah, I'm not going to go too much in depth for this section, since we already, again, have the Greybox, which I'm going to show you how to make use out of in the next lesson. So after we're basically done with the level itself, once you have like a general idea of the Greybox that you want to have yourself set up with, you'd be then afterwards needed to just set it up as a simple static mesh. And for example, you'd be using something like Blender to create assets for it. So once you have just like a general overall aesthetic, the size of the stairs and whatnot. By the way, in order to change the size of the stairs, what you can do is, if you go to here, I totally forgot to mention that you have certain controls over the shape settings itself, over the meshes. So the box itself would have the width, height, and depth over here after you select the box. So I have the box selected over here, and the width, height, and depth. You can see these being the options. If we were to change it, you'd have different options. Usually I keep them as default. But for the stairs though, we would need to maybe increase it. So for example, reach the top of this building. So for us to do that, we'd need to basically increase some settings. So changing this to 20 steps, we'll get a much larger staircase, and changing it to like 25, we'll get it something like so. Click play. We're going to be able to get ourselves a much nicer staircase, which now we can use to get up to this sort of a height. And that's all it is. All of the static meshes that we create get generated into this generator folder. We can see all of them over here. So even if we don't create new stairs, we can always just grab the ones that we had and just bring it in already existing ones. So this way we can see which ones of the meshes, for example, would be more or less the same kind of size or like the same kind of stairs. So if we're making a modular piece, an asset type of a pack, we'd know which exact type of meshes we need to just make once basically. And that's quite nice as well. So yeah, that's pretty much it for just creating a nice piece. When working with Greybox, I'll talk about how to actually make a nicer, visually aesthetic looking piece in the next lesson though. But one more thing I should mention is that after you're done with this, you would need to export it out to another program. So for us to do that, we'd basically save out the level, click Control and save to save it out. I'm going to go back to selection mode, by the way, since I don't want this tab on the side to be just visible. I'm going to go out of it. And yeah, we can just simply click or right click on the harbor map. We can click on asset actions and then click export. By doing that, we get ourselves with an FBX file, and FBX files can be imported into any type of 3D modeling software basically. And then afterwards you can start actually doing the modeling work. Since Unreal Engine is a great game engine, real-time renderer, amazing stuff for that. It has a nice physics and particles engine, but it's not a 3D modeling program. So yeah, that's going to be it for this lesson. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be seeing you.